My husband spent our life savings on impressing his friends, treating our future like it was disposable, just another expense for his social image. But I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. And while he thought he could keep living his fantasy life at my expense, I was secretly plotting my escape, something that would give me back the independence he never thought I deserved. This is how I bought my freedom and reclaimed my life. I married Tom believing we were partners building a future together. I worked extra shifts, saved every dollar, and sacrificed my own dreams for what I thought was our shared vision. I never imagined he would see our savings as his personal fund for weekend getaways and expensive parties. When I discovered our empty account, I felt the weight of his betrayal crushing me. But instead of accepting this as my reality, I chose to take control. I was ready to fight for my worth and build a life that was truly mine. Before I dive into my story, let me know in the comments how you're feeling today and where you're listening from. I truly appreciate your support, and if my journey resonates with you, consider subscribing. It fuels my courage to share my truth. Now, let's get into my story. I am Clara, a woman in my late 30s. I live in a nice suburban neighborhood with my husband Tom. At first glance, our life looks perfect. We have a decent house, a good job, and friends we enjoy. But there is more under the surface. Tom is charming and fun. He loves to make people laugh. Many of our friends admire him. They have big houses, fancy cars, and expensive clothes. Tom wants to be like them. I see him working hard to impress them. I thought it was just a phase. I believed we would save money for our future. But as time went on, Tom's obsession grew. He started spending more on things we didn't need. I would find him talking about the latest gadgets or the most expensive restaurants. I tried to remind him of our dreams, of saving for a bigger house, but he would brush me off. He said it was important to keep up with his friends. One day, I noticed something strange. I checked our savings account. My heart sank. The money we had saved was almost gone. I felt a wave of shock. I spent hours thinking about it. I could not understand how this happened. Finally, I confronted Tom. I asked him about the missing money. I wanted to know where it went. He laughed it off, saying it was just a setback. He told me he had taken a few friends on a vacation. They went to a luxurious resort. I felt anger rise in me. How could he spend our money like that? I told him it was not just a setback. It was our savings. It was meant for our future. He shrugged, saying he needed to impress his friends for his career. I was furious. I felt betrayed. I had worked hard to save that money. The argument escalated quickly. I could feel my heart racing. I told him he was being selfish. He shot back, saying I didn't understand the importance of social status. I felt tears in my eyes. This was not just about the money. It was about respect. I felt like I was not valued in our marriage. Tom then said something that shocked me. He said he had no intention of replacing the money. He believed it was worth it for his social status. Those words cut deep. I felt my world crumbling. I started questioning my value in the relationship. Was I just a burden to him? I left the room feeling lost. I sat on the couch and thought about everything. I thought about all the dreams we had shared and how quickly they were fading away. I felt angry and sad at the same time. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him and make him see how wrong he was. But I knew that would not help. As days went by, things felt different. The tension in the house grew. I could feel the distance between us. I went to work and I put on a brave face. But inside, I felt broken. I was tired of being the one who held everything together. I wanted to feel valued again. Then, one quiet evening, I sat alone in the living room. I flipped through social media, trying to find a distraction. That's when I stumbled upon a post about a vacation home for sale in a nearby state. It was small, charming, and reasonably priced. I felt a flicker of hope. I imagined a place where I could escape, a place where I could breathe. I started dreaming. I pictured myself in that house, surrounded by nature, far from Tom's world. I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I knew I had to take control of my life. I wanted something for myself, something that was not tied to Tom's needs or expectations. That weekend, I met my old friend Mia for coffee. We talked about life and our struggles. Mia shared her own story of breaking away from a toxic relationship. Her strength inspired me. I felt a spark of determination. If she could do it, maybe I could too. Mia encouraged me to invest in myself. She told me that I deserved happiness. Her words echoed in my mind. I decided then and there to secretly plan for my getaway. I wanted to escape Tom's cycle of selfishness. I wanted to create my own path. I began to think about how I could save money without Tom knowing. I started cutting back on expenses. I worked extra hours at my job. Every dollar I saved felt like a victory. I opened a new bank account just for this purpose. It felt risky, but I was determined. As I worked towards my goal, I began to feel empowered. I was taking steps for myself. I imagined weekends spent in that cozy vacation home, far away from Tom's demands. I could picture myself relaxing, reading, and enjoying my own company. The more I planned, the more I realized how much I wanted this. I felt a sense of freedom growing inside me. I was ready to step away from Tom's world and start living for myself. I just needed to keep my plan secret for now. I had no idea how this journey would unfold, but I was ready to take the first step. I was tired of feeling lost and unloved. I wanted to reclaim my life, and this was only the beginning. After my meeting with Mia, I felt a new sense of purpose. I spent the next few days planning my secret investment. I was determined to save enough money for that vacation home, but I knew I couldn't keep avoiding Tom forever. One evening, I decided it was time to confront him about our finances. I found him in the living room, scrolling through his phone, looking for the latest gadget. I took a deep breath and sat down across from him. I asked him about our savings. I wanted to know why he thought it was okay to spend our money on his friends. He looked up, surprised by my serious tone. At first, he dismissed my concerns again. He said it was just a temporary setback. I felt anger rising inside me. I told him that a setback was not just a few $1,000s gone. It was our future. I reminded him of our dreams. I reminded him of our plans to buy a bigger house. I felt my voice shaking, but I held my ground. I wanted him to see how serious this was. Tom's expression changed. He became defensive. He insisted that impressing his friends was important for his career. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told him that his friends did not care about him. They only liked the status he projected. The argument escalated quickly. I felt the words spilling out of me. I told him he was selfish and that I felt unappreciated. He shot back, saying I didn't understand his world. I felt tears in my eyes. This was not just a financial issue. It was about respect and love. Then, he dropped a bombshell. He said he had no intention of replacing the money. He believed it was worth it to keep up appearances. My heart sank. I felt like I was punched in the gut. How could he think this way? How could he not see the damage he was causing? I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I started questioning my value in this relationship. I felt like I was just a means to an end for him. I wanted to scream, but instead, I stood up and walked away. I needed space to think. The next few days were tense. I went through the motions of daily life, but I felt broken inside. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Tom seemed to notice my distance, but he didn't address it. Instead, he continued to act as if everything was normal. When I tried to talk to him about something else, he would brush me off. He was too busy planning his next outing with his friends. I felt more alone than ever. I kept reminding myself that I was working on my secret plan. I was saving money for my escape. But then something strange happened. One evening, Tom came home in a panic. He had just learned that he was under pressure at work. He worried that he might lose his job. That was a turning point for me. I felt a mix of concern and relief. He sat down and began to talk about our finances again. He asked me if we could work together to fix things. I listened, but I felt guarded. I wanted to help, but I didn't want to fall back into old patterns. I asked him how he planned to fix the financial mess he had created. He said he would cut back on some expenses. He even mentioned selling some things. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was the moment he would change, but deep down, I was skeptical. As the days passed, I noticed that Tom was trying to be more attentive. He started asking about my day and engaging in conversations, but I still felt that something was off. I was not ready to trust him fully. I remembered how easily he had dismissed my feelings before. One night, we had dinner together. Tom talked about his plans for a big party at our house for his friends. I felt a knot in my stomach. I remembered how he always wanted to impress them. I asked him if he thought it was a good idea, considering our financial situation. He waved my concerns away, saying that it would be fine. He wanted to show off our home and the life we built together. I felt frustrated. I realized that he still didn't understand the impact of his actions. He was more focused on his image than on our reality. I decided to go to my secret getaway that weekend. I needed to clear my head. I packed a small bag and drove to the vacation home. As I arrived, I felt the weight lift off my shoulders. This place was my sanctuary. I spent the weekend cleaning and organizing. I could finally think clearly. I felt free. I thought about my future and the choices I had to make. I could not keep living in Tom's shadow. I needed to choose a life that was mine. As I worked on the house, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I was taking control, and it felt good. I began to imagine a life where I could be happy and independent. I knew it would not be easy, but I was ready to fight for my happiness. When I returned home, I felt stronger. I was ready to stand up for myself. I knew that I could no longer ignore the problems in my marriage. I had to take action. I had to confront Tom again, but this time, it would be different. I was not just a passive participant in my life anymore. I was ready to reclaim my value. After returning from the vacation home, I felt a fire inside me. I was ready to take control of my life. I could no longer rely on Tom to make things better. I needed to decide what I wanted for myself. The next day, I went to work and tried to focus, but my mind kept drifting to that charming vacation home. I began to think about what it would mean to own a place of my own, a place where I could escape, reflect, and breathe. I realized I wanted more than just a getaway. I wanted a life filled with purpose. That afternoon, I stumbled upon a social media post about a small cottage for sale in a neighboring state. It was adorable and affordable. The photos showed a cozy fireplace and a beautiful view of the woods. I felt my heart race as I imagined myself there. The thought of having my own space filled me with excitement. I called Mia later that evening. I shared my plans and how I had found the perfect cottage. She was thrilled for me and encouraged me to take the next steps. She reminded me that I deserved to invest in my happiness. Her words gave me more confidence. I started doing research on how to buy a home on my own. I learned about the process of purchasing property. I found out about financing options and what I needed to get started. I felt empowered as I gathered information. Each piece of knowledge added to my strength. Soon I began to save more seriously. I cut back on unnecessary expenses. I stopped buying things I didn't need. I worked extra hours at my job, taking on more shifts. Every dollar I saved felt like a step closer to my dream. I even started taking public transportation to work to save on gas and parking. As I worked, I felt a sense of purpose growing. I was not just saving money, I was reclaiming my independence. I was building a future that was mine alone. I opened a separate bank account to keep my savings hidden from Tom. I wanted to protect my plans. One day, I found a financial advisor who could help me with the purchase. I scheduled a meeting and felt nervous but excited. I wanted to make sure I was doing everything right. The advisor was friendly and listened to my goals. He explained how to navigate the process of buying a home. I felt relieved to have someone guiding me. After our meeting, I returned home feeling optimistic. I had a plan, and I was determined to see it through. But I knew I had to keep my plan secret for now. I didn't want Tom to interfere or dismiss my dreams. As days turned into weeks, I continued saving. I would often visit the vacation home on weekends. Each time, I felt more connected to the idea of owning it. Yet the cottage was not just a getaway. It was a symbol of my freedom. I could picture myself there, away from Tom's expectations. One afternoon, I decided to visit the cottage again. As I walked through the door, I felt a wave of peace. I started cleaning and decorating, imagining how I would use the space. I could see myself reading by the fire, cooking in the small kitchen, and enjoying the quiet. During one of my visits, Mia came to join me. I was excited to share my vision for the cottage. Together, we painted the walls and rearranged the furniture. We laughed and talked about our dreams. It felt good to have someone who understood me and supported my choices. While we were working, I received a call from Tom. He wanted to know when I would be home. He mentioned he had been thinking about the party and wanted my input. I felt a knot in my stomach. I realized that Tom's priorities had not changed. He was still focused on impressing his friends. I told him I would be home later that evening. After hanging up, I felt a mix of emotions. I wanted to be supportive, but I also felt frustrated. I knew I had to confront him about our relationship soon. I couldn't keep living in his world. As the weekend ended, I returned home with Mia. I felt ready to talk to Tom. I wanted to express my feelings and share my plans for the cottage. I knew it would be a difficult conversation, but I was determined to stand my ground. That night, I found Tom watching TV. I sat down beside him and took a deep breath. I started to share my feelings about how I felt neglected and unappreciated. I told him I was tired of living for his approval. Tom listened, but I could see the discomfort on his face. I then revealed my plans for the vacation home. I told him I had been saving money and had made significant progress. I wanted him to understand that I was taking steps for myself. His reaction shocked me. He became angry and defensive. He said I was being unreasonable. He felt threatened by my independence, and I could see it in his eyes. I felt my heart race as I stood my ground. I told him that I deserved to have a life of my own, separate from his need for validation. I was not asking for his permission. I was claiming my right to be happy. The argument intensified, and I could feel the divide between us growing. As we argued, I realized that I could not continue like this. I had to choose my own path. I said I needed time to think about our relationship. I felt empowered, but I also knew that my journey was just beginning. I decided to spend more time at the cottage. It was a place where I could be myself and feel free. I wanted to embrace this new chapter in my life, even if it meant facing tough choices ahead. I was ready to take that leap into the unknown. After the argument with Tom, I felt a mix of emotions. I was angry, sad, and relieved all at once. I knew I needed to focus on my plans for the cottage. I was determined to make it happen. I started researching vacation homes more seriously. I looked for properties that were affordable and met my needs. I wanted a place where I could feel at peace and be myself. I found a small, charming cottage that seemed perfect. It was nestled in the woods, surrounded by nature. I could picture myself there, away from the chaos of my life with Tom. I reached out to my financial advisor again. I wanted to know how much I needed for a down payment. He explained the costs and what I could afford based on my savings. I felt excited and nervous at the same time. I was getting closer to my goal. To save more money, I decided to take on extra shifts at work. I worked weekends and evenings, putting in long hours. I was tired, but I felt a sense of purpose. Each paycheck brought me closer to my dream. I also stopped going out with friends and cut back on expenses even more. I wanted every dollar to count. As I saved, I felt empowered. I was building something for myself. I kept my plans a secret from Tom. I didn't want him to interfere or try to convince me to change my mind. I knew he would not understand my need for independence. One day, I visited the cottage again. It was serene and quiet. I spent hours cleaning and organizing. I imagined how I would decorate the space. I thought about the cozy evenings I would spend there, reading books and enjoying the beauty of nature. It was my escape, and I felt a strong connection to it. During one of my visits, I received a call from Mia. She wanted to come to see the cottage. I was excited to share my progress with her. When she arrived, she was amazed by the charm of the place. We spent the day working together, painting the walls and arranging furniture. It felt good to have someone who appreciated my vision. As we worked, I talked to her about my plans to buy the cottage. Mia was supportive and encouraged me to go for it. She reminded me that this was my chance to create a life I loved. Her words filled me with confidence. But as the weeks passed, I noticed Tom becoming more suspicious. He asked me where I spent my weekends. I told him I was working on personal projects, but I could see he didn't believe me. He started to push for more details, and I felt the pressure mounting. I knew I had to be careful. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find Tom waiting for me. He looked serious. He asked me again where I had been. I felt my heart race. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to reveal my plans just yet. I told him I was working on things for myself. I could see his frustration growing. He said I was being secretive and that it wasn't fair. I felt angry at his reaction. I reminded him of how he had treated me and how I had every right to pursue my own happiness. The conversation escalated quickly. Tom accused me of pushing him away. I felt overwhelmed. I wanted to scream that I was trying to find myself, but instead, I chose to stay calm. I told him I needed space to figure things out. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying to keep my plans hidden while also standing my ground. After that confrontation, I returned to the cottage. I needed the peace it offered. I spent the weekend reflecting on my life and my choices. I was more determined than ever to make the cottage my own. I felt a strong sense of freedom there. As I worked on the cottage, I began to think about my future. I could see myself spending more time there, away from Tom's expectations. I wanted to create a space that was all mine. I imagined hosting friends, cooking, and relaxing in my own little haven. The more I thought about it, the more I wanted to move forward. I started looking at financing options seriously. I contacted my financial advisor to discuss what steps I needed to take to buy the cottage. He explained the process clearly, and I felt a rush of excitement. Finally, I was ready to make an offer on the cottage. I had saved enough money for the down payment. I felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. This was a big step, but it was one I was ready to take. I wanted to claim my independence and build a life that was truly mine. As I signed the papers for the offer, I felt a sense of empowerment. This was a turning point for me. I was no longer just Tom's wife. I was Clara, a woman with dreams and goals of her own. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. As I left the office, I felt hopeful about the future. I knew there would be challenges ahead, but I was ready to face them. I was carving out a new path for myself, one that would lead to happiness and fulfillment. The cottage was just the beginning of my journey toward reclaiming my life. With each step I took, I felt stronger. I was ready to embrace the changes ahead. I was ready to create a life filled with joy and purpose. I had taken control, and I was not looking back. After weeks of saving and planning, the day finally arrived. I had enough money for the down payment on the cottage. I felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as I drove to the office to sign the papers. This was a significant step, and I was ready to make it official. When I arrived, my financial advisor greeted me with a smile. He led me to a small conference room filled with papers and a big stack of contracts. I took a deep breath. This was it. I was about to take ownership of my own space. As I sat at the table, I felt a rush of emotions. I thought about all the hard work I had put into this. I remembered the late nights, the extra shifts, and the sacrifices. I was not just buying a cottage, I was claiming my independence. The advisor explained the terms of the agreement. I listened carefully, understanding each detail. He made everything clear, and I felt more confident. After going over the paperwork, it was time to sign. I picked up the pen and felt a surge of happiness as I wrote my name. This was my moment. Once the papers were signed, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was officially a homeowner. I couldn't believe it. I was filled with joy. I wanted to celebrate, but I also knew I needed to keep this a secret from Tom for now. As I left the office, I called Mia. I wanted to share the good news with someone who understood how much this meant to me. When she answered, I could hear the excitement in her voice. I told her that I had signed the papers for the cottage. She cheered and congratulated me. Her support meant everything. I drove to the cottage after the meeting. I felt like a kid on Christmas morning. When I arrived, I stood in front of the door and took a deep breath. This was my place now. I opened the door and stepped inside, feeling a sense of belonging wash over me. I spent the next few hours going through the cottage, imagining how I would make it my own. I wanted to create a warm and inviting space. I moved furniture around and decorated with little touches that reflected my personality. I felt a sense of peace in every corner. But as I worked, I remembered Tom. I realized I couldn't keep this a secret for long. It was unfair to hide such an important part of my life from him. I had to find the right time to tell him. I needed to prepare for his reaction. That night, I returned home. Tom was sitting on the couch, watching TV. I felt a knot in my stomach as I approached him. I knew I had to be honest, but I was scared of how he would react. I took a deep breath and sat next to him. I started by telling him that I had something important to share. I watched his face closely as I revealed that I had purchased a cottage. I explained how I had saved money and planned everything. I wanted him to understand why this was so important to me. At first, he looked shocked. Then his expression shifted to anger. He said I should have discussed it with him before making such a big decision. I felt my heart sink. I tried to explain that this was about my independence, but he didn't want to hear it. He accused me of shutting him out and making decisions without him. I could feel frustration rising inside me. I reminded him that he had taken our savings and prioritized his friends over our relationship. I told him I needed this for myself. The argument escalated quickly. Tom's voice grew louder. He said I was being selfish and that I was abandoning the life we built together. I felt hurt by his words. I had not abandoned anything. I was trying to find my own happiness. As we fought, I stayed calm. I knew this was a turning point. I had to stand my ground. I told him that I deserved a life that was fulfilling, and this cottage was a step toward that. I emphasized that I was not trying to hurt him. I was trying to heal myself. After what felt like hours, the argument ended with Tom walking away in anger. I sat on the couch, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. I had shared my truth, and I felt proud of myself for doing so. I knew I was on the right path, even if it was difficult. Over the next few days, things felt tense at home. Tom didn't bring up the cottage again, and I didn't push him. I needed space to process the conversation. I spent more time at the cottage, working and enjoying my new sanctuary. Each visit made me feel stronger. One day, Mia called and asked if I wanted her to come for a weekend. I welcomed the idea. I wanted to share my new space with someone who understood my journey. When she arrived, she was amazed by the cottage. We spent the weekend decorating and planning. I felt happy and free. I wanted to create a place where I could host friends and enjoy life. Mia helped me with ideas, and we laughed as we worked. It felt good to have someone supportive by my side. As we decorated, I felt a sense of hope. This cottage was more than a home. It was a fresh start. I realized that I was building a new life for myself, one that was filled with joy and purpose. I was ready to embrace the changes ahead. Later that evening, while sitting on the porch with Mia, I looked out at the stars. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that I was on the right track. I was taking control of my life, and it felt incredible. With each passing day, I felt more confident in my decision. I was creating a future filled with possibilities. I was ready to embrace this new chapter. I was ready to be Clara, a woman who had reclaimed her life and was living for herself. The weekend with Mia was refreshing. We spent hours decorating the cottage and sharing stories about our lives. I felt lighter, more alive. This place was becoming a true sanctuary for me. I couldn't wait to spend more weekends here, away from the tension at home. But as I settled into my new routine, I knew I couldn't ignore Tom forever. I felt conflicted about how to handle the situation. My heart told me to focus on my new life, but my mind reminded me that I still had responsibilities at home. One day, while I was at the cottage, I received a phone call from Tom. He wanted to talk about a party he planned for his friends at our house. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this was going to be a big event, just like the ones he always threw. I hesitated before answering. When I picked up the phone, I could hear the excitement in his voice. He described all the details: food, drinks, and decorations. It sounded extravagant, just like everything else he did to impress his friends. I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. I told him I wasn't sure about the party. I reminded him that we were still dealing with our financial situation. I could hear his irritation growing. He insisted that this party was important for his social life. I felt like we were back to square one. Tom went on about how much his friends would enjoy the event and how it would help him at work. I realized he still didn't understand my perspective. I wanted to support him, but I couldn't ignore my own needs. I told him I needed time to think about it. After I hung up, I felt a mix of emotions. I was angry and sad. I wanted to be happy for him, but I also wanted to protect my new life at the cottage. I decided to spend some time in nature to clear my head. I took a walk through the woods surrounding the cottage, listening to the sounds of birds and the rustle of leaves. As I walked, I felt the tension in my body start to ease. I realized that I had a choice to make. I could either continue to fight for my independence or fall back into the old patterns with Tom. I remembered how important this journey was for me. I didn't want to lose the progress I had made. Later that evening, I sat on the porch with a warm cup of tea. I looked out at the sunset, feeling grateful for this space. I knew I needed to confront Tom again. I had to express my feelings clearly. I needed to show him that I was serious about my independence. The next day, I returned home. Tom was busy preparing for the party. I watched him move around the house, setting up decorations and making plans. I felt a pang of sadness. This was the man I had married, yet he seemed so different now. I gathered my courage and approached him. I told him I wanted to talk about the party and our relationship. He looked up from his work, his expression shifting from excitement to concern. I took a deep breath and explained that while I understood the importance of his social life, I also needed him to understand my feelings. I told him that I felt unappreciated and neglected. I explained how the party felt like another way for him to seek validation from others instead of nurturing our relationship. Tom listened, but I could see the frustration building in him. He said I was being unreasonable, that I didn't understand how hard he worked to maintain his image. I felt my heart race. I reminded him that I was not against him having friends or enjoying life, but I wanted him to see the bigger picture. I told him that I was trying to find my own happiness at the cottage. I emphasized that my independence didn't mean I was abandoning him. I wanted him to support my journey, just as I wanted to support his. The conversation became tense. Tom raised his voice, saying that I was ruining the party before it even started. I felt hurt, but stood my ground. I told him that I needed him to step back and see things from my perspective. I wanted a partnership, not a competition for social approval. As the argument escalated, I felt exhausted. I realized that we were not on the same page. I needed to make a decision. I had to protect my newfound independence and happiness. Finally, I told him that I needed to spend more time at the cottage. I felt a sense of relief wash over me as I said those words. I needed space to reflect and grow. I hoped that this would give Tom a chance to think about our relationship too. After that conversation, I returned to the cottage. I felt both heavy and light. I was sad about the state of our relationship, but I also felt liberated. I spent the weekend focusing on myself, cooking, reading, and enjoying the quiet. As the sun set that Sunday, I sat on the porch, looking out at the trees. I realized that I was building a life that I loved. I was finding my voice, and it felt powerful. I knew that I had made the right choice for myself. I also knew that I would have to face Tom again soon. I hoped he would come to understand my need for independence. But for now, I was happy to be in my own space, embracing the journey ahead. The cottage was becoming my refuge, a place where I could grow and thrive. With each passing day, I felt stronger and more confident. I was ready to embrace whatever came next. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I was ready to live my life on my terms. After my confrontation with Tom, I returned to the cottage feeling both relieved and anxious. I spent the next few days reflecting on our relationship and what I truly wanted. I knew I needed to focus on myself and my happiness, but the thought of Tom and the party lingered in my mind. 1 week later, I decided to attend the party. I wanted to see how Tom interacted with his friends and assess the situation for myself. I felt nervous as I got ready. I put on a simple dress and tried to look my best. I wanted to show Tom that I could also be part of his world, but I knew that I had to maintain my own identity. When I arrived at the house, I was greeted by loud music and laughter. The atmosphere was lively, filled with Tom's friends, showing off their latest accomplishments. I felt out of place as I stepped inside. It was clear that Tom was in his element, surrounded by people who admired him for his social status. As I walked through the crowd, I noticed how superficial the conversations were. People were more interested in talking about their latest vacations or new cars than meaningful connections. I felt a knot in my stomach. This was not the life I wanted. I found Tom in the kitchen laughing with a group of friends. He looked happy, but I felt a pang of sadness. I wanted him to be happy, but I also wanted him to care about our relationship. I approached him and tried to join the conversation, but I felt like an outsider. As the night went on, I noticed Tom bragging about his new life without mentioning me. He spoke about his achievements and plans, but I felt invisible. My heart ached at that moment. I realized how much I had been living in the shadows of his desires, while my own needs were pushed aside. I stepped outside to get some fresh air. The cool night breeze felt refreshing against my skin. I stood on the porch, looking up at the stars. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. I felt lost and confused. I had fought so hard for my independence, but I still cared about Tom. I wanted him to see me and appreciate our relationship. After a few minutes, I decided to go back inside. I wanted to confront Tom about how I felt. I approached him again, but this time, I was determined to express my feelings. I pulled him aside, away from the noise. I told him that I wanted to talk. I explained how I felt hurt by his words. I reminded him that I was part of his life, and he needed to acknowledge that. Tom's expression changed. He looked surprised and a bit defensive. He said that he was just trying to impress his friends. I felt my frustration rising. I told him that I understood the importance of social connections, But I also wanted him to value our relationship. I needed him to see that I was not just his wife. I was an individual with my own dreams and needs. Tom listened, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to accept that I was right. He argued that I was being too sensitive, that his friends were just having fun. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. I explained that it wasn't just about the party. It was about feeling like I mattered in his life. The conversation grew tense. I felt my heart pounding as I stood my ground. I told him that I deserved to be respected and valued. I needed him to understand that my independence did not mean I was abandoning him. It meant I was choosing to live a life that fulfilled me. Tom's face turned red, and I could see he was struggling. He finally admitted that he didn't realize how much his actions affected me. He said he was focused on his career and social life, but he didn't want to lose me. Hearing those words made me feel a flicker of hope. I told him that I wanted us to work together. I wanted him to support my journey, just as I would support his. I emphasized that we needed to find a balance between our individual lives and our relationship. It was essential for both of us to feel fulfilled. As we talked, I could see him processing my words. I hoped he would understand the importance of our connection. I wanted him to realize that I was not asking him to change who he was. I was asking him to include me in his life. The night continued, but I felt a shift between us. Tom seemed more attentive, and I could see that he was trying to understand my perspective. As the party wound down, I felt a sense of relief. We had made progress, and I was grateful for that. After everyone left, Tom and I sat on the couch, exhausted but content. We talked more about our feelings and what we wanted for the future. I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. It was clear that we both needed to work on our relationship, but I was willing to put in the effort. In that moment, I realized that love requires communication and understanding. I didn't want to lose Tom, but I also didn't want to lose myself. I knew that we had a long road ahead, but I was ready to face it together. As I lay in bed that night, I felt a sense of peace. I had taken a stand for myself, and I was excited about the possibilities ahead. I was reclaiming my life, and I hoped Tom would join me on this journey. The next day, I returned to the cottage, feeling lighter. I was ready to embrace the changes and challenges ahead, knowing that I had the strength to create the life I wanted. I was becoming the woman I always wanted to be. After the party, things felt different between Tom and me. We had opened up our lines of communication, and it felt like a small step toward healing. I was hopeful that we could find a balance that allowed both of us to thrive, but I knew we still had a long way to go. I returned to the cottage for the weekend, eager to enjoy my space. I wanted to spend time reflecting on what I wanted for the future. I spent the afternoon working on the garden, planting flowers and herbs. The fresh air and sunshine lifted my spirits. I felt grounded and connected to my new life. As I worked, I thought about Tom and our conversation. I wanted to believe that he could change, but I also knew I had to be prepared for anything. I wanted to confront him again, this time about the future of our relationship. It was necessary to lay it all out on the table. That evening, I called Mia to share my thoughts. She listened patiently as I explained my feelings. I told her that I wanted to be honest with Tom about my needs and my vision for our relationship. Mia encouraged me to be brave and assertive. She reminded me that I deserved a partnership where both of us could grow. The next day, I returned home. Tom was waiting for me, looking a bit anxious. I could tell he had been thinking about our last conversation. I took a deep breath and decided to talk to him right away. I told him that I wanted to discuss our relationship further. I explained that while I appreciated his willingness to listen, I needed to make my feelings clear. I wanted to share my vision for our future together. Tom nodded, looking serious. He said he was ready to hear me out. I felt a sense of gratitude for his openness. I began by expressing how important it was for both of us to prioritize our individual goals while still nurturing our relationship. I explained that I wanted to create a balanced life, one where we could support each other's dreams. I told him how I envisioned my time at the cottage as a space for growth and reflection. I wanted him to understand that this was not just about me, it was about us. As I spoke, I saw Tom's expression change. He looked thoughtful, and I hoped he was beginning to understand. I continued by sharing my desire for more honesty and communication in our relationship. I wanted us to be partners who lifted each other up instead of competing for attention. Tom listened carefully, and when I finished, he took a moment to respond. He admitted that he had been caught up in his own world and that he hadn't realized how much it affected me. He expressed a desire to change and to be more supportive of my journey. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I told him that I appreciated his willingness to listen and adapt. It was a step in the right direction, but I also reminded him that actions speak louder than words. I needed to see real changes in how he approached our relationship. Tom agreed and said he wanted to try harder. He promised to make more time for us and to be more present. I could see sincerity in his eyes, and I wanted to believe him. It felt like we were finally on the same page. However, I knew that rebuilding trust would take time. I reminded him that I would also need space to focus on my own goals. I emphasized that my independence was not a threat, but a way for both of us to grow. As our conversation continued, I felt more empowered. I was no longer afraid to express my needs. I was reclaiming my voice in our relationship, and it felt good. I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter for us. After our talk, Tom suggested we spend the weekend at the cottage together. He thought it could be a good way to reconnect. I liked the idea, and we packed our bags for a mini getaway. When we arrived at the cottage, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The familiar surroundings made me feel at home. Tom seemed more relaxed too, and we spent the evening cooking dinner together. We laughed and shared stories, enjoying each other's company. As the sun set, we sat outside on the porch, sipping tea. The stars began to twinkle, and I felt grateful for this moment. I realized that while we still had challenges to face, we were taking steps in the right direction. That night, we talked about our dreams and goals. Tom shared his aspirations for work, and I shared my vision for the cottage. I felt a sense of excitement as we discussed how we could support each other. It was refreshing to see him so engaged and interested. As the weekend continued, we worked together to improve the cottage. We painted the walls, rearranged furniture, and even planted a small vegetable garden. It felt good to collaborate on something meaningful. I was starting to see a new side of Tom, one that was willing to join me in creating a life together. By the end of the weekend, I felt hopeful about our relationship. We had made progress, but I knew we still had to work on our communication. I was ready to embrace the journey ahead, knowing that it would not always be easy. As we drove back home, I felt a sense of optimism. I was reclaiming my life, and Tom was beginning to understand the importance of supporting each other. I knew that with time, patience, and effort, we could build a strong partnership. I was excited about the future, and as I looked at the road ahead, I felt ready to face whatever came next. I was becoming the woman I wanted to be, and I hoped that together, Tom and I could create a life filled with love, respect, and shared dreams. After our weekend at the cottage, I felt a renewed sense of hope for my relationship with Tom. We had made progress, but I knew that we still needed to work on ourselves. I was excited about the changes, but I also felt the weight of uncertainty. As the weeks passed, I spent more time at the cottage. It was my space for reflection and growth. I enjoyed the quiet moments, listening to the birds and feeling the wind through the trees. I was starting to feel at home there, and I wanted to make the most of it. One sunny Saturday, I was working in the garden when I met Jake, the local handyman. He was friendly and offered to help me with some repairs around the cottage. I accepted his help, grateful for the support. As we worked together, we talked about our lives. I found him easy to talk to, and his sense of humor made me laugh. Jake was kind and attentive, and I enjoyed his company. I felt a spark that I hadn't felt in a long time. It was refreshing to connect with someone who was genuinely interested in me. We spent hours working together, and I found myself looking forward to his visits. As the days turned into weeks, I noticed that my feelings for Jake were growing. He was supportive and encouraging, always asking about my plans for the cottage. He made me feel seen in a way that I hadn't experienced in a long time. I knew it was just friendship, but I couldn't help but feel a connection. Meanwhile, I kept communicating with Tom. I wanted to make sure we were on the same page. We talked about our plans for the future and how we could support each other. Tom seemed genuine in his efforts, and I appreciated the progress we were making. One evening, Tom surprised me by showing up at the cottage. He wanted to surprise me with a romantic dinner. I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I wanted to enjoy the moment, but I also felt guilty about my growing feelings for Jake. As we sat down for dinner, I did my best to push those feelings aside. Tom was charming and attentive, and I could see he was trying hard to make things work. He talked about his job and the changes he was making. I felt proud of him. But as the night went on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in two separate worlds. Tom was focused on his career, while I was discovering my own passions at the cottage. I wanted to share my dreams with him, but I also feared that he wouldn't understand. After dinner, we sat on the porch, watching the stars. It was a beautiful night, and I wanted to talk to him about my goals for the cottage. I took a deep breath, ready to open up. I started by sharing my vision for the space. I talked about the garden, the renovations, and how I wanted to create a retreat for myself and friends. But as I spoke, I noticed Tom's expression change. He seemed distracted, and I could sense that he was not fully present. I felt a wave of disappointment wash over me. I realized that while he was making an effort, he still struggled to understand the importance of my independence. I decided to be honest about my feelings. I told him that I appreciated his efforts, but that I also wanted him to be more engaged in my life. I needed him to recognize that my dreams were just as important as his. I wanted him to support my journey, not just as a partner, but as a friend. Tom listened, but I could see the discomfort in his eyes. He said he was trying, but he felt overwhelmed with work and social obligations. He didn't realize how much I needed him to be present in our relationship. We ended the night without fully resolving our issues. I felt frustrated and confused. I wanted to build a life together, but it felt like we were still struggling to connect. I realized that I had to make a choice. The next day, I returned to the cottage, needing time to think. I walked through the garden, feeling the soft earth beneath my feet. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind. I knew I had to focus on what I truly wanted. As I worked in the garden, Jake stopped by to check on me. He noticed that I seemed off and asked if I was okay. I shared my feelings about Tom and how I felt torn between my past and my present. Jake listened intently, offering support without judgment. I found comfort in talking to him. He encouraged me to follow my heart and reminded me that I deserved happiness. His words resonated with me, and I felt a sense of clarity. I realized that I needed to make a choice about my future. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sunset. I felt a mix of emotions. I cared for Tom, but I also felt a strong connection with Jake. I knew I couldn't ignore my feelings any longer. I had to decide what I wanted for my life. The next day, I called Tom. I wanted to meet and have an honest conversation about our relationship. I felt nervous, but knew it was necessary. I needed to lay everything on the table. When we met, I took a deep breath and began to speak from my heart. I told him that while I appreciated his efforts, I felt like we were still missing something. I explained how I had been spending time at the cottage and how it had become a place of healing for me. Tom listened, and I could see the concern in his eyes. I shared my feelings about Jake and how I had developed a friendship with him. I told Tom that I needed to be honest about my emotions. As I spoke, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was being true to myself, and it felt liberating. I knew this conversation would be difficult, but I was ready to face the truth. Tom looked hurt, but also understanding. He admitted that he had been focused on his career and hadn't given our relationship the attention it deserved. We both knew we had a lot to work through, but at that moment I felt a sense of clarity. I realized that I had to choose my own path, even if it meant making difficult decisions. I wanted to embrace my independence and explore my feelings. I was ready to take control of my life, and I hoped Tom would understand. As we talked, I felt a sense of hope. I knew that whatever happened next, I was ready to face it. I was reclaiming my life, and I was excited about the possibilities ahead, both for myself and for Tom. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to embrace it all. After the conversation with Tom, I felt a mix of relief and uncertainty. I had finally spoken my truth, but I knew the path ahead would not be easy. I needed to figure out what I truly wanted for my life. I had taken a stand for my independence, but I also cared about Tom. The next few days were filled with reflection. I spent time at the cottage, working in the garden, and enjoying the peace of my surroundings. I felt grateful for this space and the freedom it offered. It was a place where I could be myself. I also spent time with Jake. Our friendship had grown stronger, and he had become a source of comfort. He listened to my thoughts and encouraged me to follow my heart. I appreciated his support, but felt conflicted about my feelings for him. One evening, I invited Jake over to the cottage. I wanted to share my thoughts and feelings about everything that had been happening. As we sat on the porch, watching the sunset, I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I took a deep breath and opened up about my relationship with Tom. I told Jake about our struggles and how I had been trying to find a balance between my independence and our connection. I explained how I cared for Tom, but also felt drawn to the freedom I was discovering. Jake listened intently. He said he admired my courage and encouraged me to think about what would make me truly happy. I appreciated his perspective and felt a sense of clarity as we talked. I realized that I needed to focus on my happiness first. As the night went on, I felt a growing connection with Jake. He made me laugh, and I enjoyed his company. I knew that I had developed feelings for him, but I wasn't sure how to navigate that. I didn't want to hurt Tom, but I also didn't want to ignore my emotions. After Jake left, I sat on the porch, feeling a mix of emotions. I knew I had to make a choice. I couldn't continue living in a state of uncertainty. I needed to decide whether to pursue a deeper connection with Jake or to give my relationship with Tom another chance. The next day, I called Tom. I wanted to meet and have a serious discussion about our future. I felt nervous, but determined. I knew that I had to be honest about my feelings and what I wanted moving forward. When we met, I could see that Tom was anxious. He wanted to know how I was feeling after our last conversation. I took a deep breath and began to share my thoughts. I told him that I had been reflecting on our relationship and the changes we needed to make. I explained that while I valued our connection, I also needed to focus on my own happiness. I needed to know that we were both committed to growing together. Tom listened carefully, and I could see that he was processing my words. I reminded him of the importance of communication and support in a relationship. I wanted him to understand that I needed him to meet me halfway. As we talked, I could see the concern in his eyes. He admitted that he had been focused on his career and hadn't given our relationship the attention it deserved. He said he wanted to make things right, but I could sense his uncertainty. I took a deep breath and shared my feelings about Jake. I told Tom that I had developed a friendship with him and that it had made me realize how important it was to feel valued and supported. I wanted him to understand that my connection with Jake was not just a distraction, it was a reminder of what I needed in a relationship. Tom's expression changed. He looked hurt, but also understanding. He admitted that he had taken me for granted and that he needed to work on being more present in my life. I appreciated his honesty, but I also knew that we had a long way to go. After our conversation, I felt a sense of clarity. I knew that I needed to take control of my life. I decided to file for separation from Tom. It was a difficult decision, but I felt it was necessary for my own growth and happiness. I wanted to embrace my independence fully. I discussed my decision with Mia, and she was supportive. She reminded me that I deserved to prioritize my happiness. I felt grateful for her friendship and encouragement. The next day, I met with a lawyer to begin the paperwork for separation. It was a step toward reclaiming my life, and I felt a mix of emotions. I was sad about the end of my marriage, but I also felt a sense of liberation. As I filled out the forms, I thought about the journey I had taken. I had discovered my strength and my voice. I was ready to embrace a new chapter in my life, one that was filled with possibilities. After the paperwork was complete, I went back to the cottage. I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I was reclaiming my space and my identity. I knew that this was just the beginning, but I was ready to face whatever came next. I spent the evening at the cottage, sitting on the porch and watching the stars. I felt hopeful for the future. I was ready to start fresh, free from the burdens of my past. I knew that I could create a life filled with joy, love, and purpose. The next day, I invited Jake over again. I wanted to be honest about my feelings and my decision to separate from Tom. I hoped that he would understand. As we talked, I felt a sense of excitement about the possibilities ahead. I was ready to embrace my freedom and explore the new connections in my life. I was reclaiming my happiness, and I knew I was on the right path. The future was uncertain, but I felt ready to face it with confidence and strength.